That's what we're going to move on to right now. We're going to have a panel discussion, and it's going to be about the theme, is crowdfunding challenging or supplementing traditional finance? And it's going to be led by Dr. Rotem Schnoor from the University of Agder. So the floor is yours, Rotem. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. I will gradually invite our dream team here, probably the best collection of people to talk about these days. And first of all, Tom Fredrik Leermann, conceptutvikling bedrift at DNB. Johan Assen, representative from Finanstilsynet. Reinveig Fardum from Innovation Norway. Lasse Mäkelä, CEO of Investor Ltd in Finland. Please join us here at the seats. Kieran Gravey from University of Cambridge. Kenneth Winter, CEO of Moonwalk. And Anders Hillestad, CEO of Antagonist, which you met earlier. But we thought we need an entrepreneur here who's been struggling to get some finance as well, and not only finance people. So we'll wait for... Well, I think the best way to start is asking each of you to say, what's your general take on crowdfunding, and where do you think it is heading? How can you relate to it? Let's start.
Thank you. Tom Leermann, DNB. I think that crowdfunding is a very interesting and important mechanism for funding future innovation in Norway. And as a bank, we could follow this closely and want to find out where it goes, and we might even see what we can do to help it run.
Reinveig Fardum, Innovation Norway. As you said, it's very interesting, and I think it might grow very rapidly now that more and more people know what it is, and the startups will also be better trained and understand how to use this tool, and that they need to prepare. Like you said earlier today, they need to prepare and be ready for this. And when it starts, I think it might grow rapidly. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to start with a historic perspective. Actually, the first successful crowdfunding took place 130 years ago. I don't know if you heard it, but the French population gave as a gift the Statue of Liberty. It came to New York, but there was no funding for the foundation for it. No politician wanted to grant money, so the publisher, Joseph Pulitzer, raised the first fundraising, crowdfunding, in his paper, New York World, and managed to collect from donations, on average less than $1, the $100,000 needed. So there's nothing new under the sun. This has been a product or a financial innovation for a very long time.
Thank you.
Continuing the same theme, basically. So crowdfunding, you could even argue that the stock exchange is crowdfunding. When you do public IPO, it's crowdfunding in that sense. But it's very differently. It's been regulated for a long time, and there is now a new way of doing it. But how I see it is that crowdfunding and what the investor is representing is that we are talking about the digitalization of the fundraising process. It's a digitalization which is going on, that has happened to media, to many different industries. Now it's come to fundraising. And that's what we do, digitalization of the fundraising process.
Yeah, I think really crowdfunding and all the various different models, they are increasingly complementing more traditional sources of finance. I don't think it's some kind of black or white dichotomy. It's definitely something that can work alongside traditional sources, whether or not that be for kind of philanthropic causes or for more traditional kind of investment-based sources. So I think it's there as a complement, and it ultimately will help various different groups, individuals and entrepreneurs raise more money.
I think for our sake, it depends a lot on the industry itself, whatever you choose to focus on. We've been talking to traditional investors since we started. We did already have an early stage investment before we went to crowdfunding, but traditionally it was very hard to talk to investors about our high risk thing. So the crowdfunding was a good way of supplementing that. But like I mentioned in my talk earlier, for us it was much more about the promotional impact of doing the campaign, which was very helpful in then securing financial later. But our focus was mostly on the rewards-based, the crowdfunding. So even I have learned a lot about other types of crowdfunding today.
Yes, hello, my name is Kenneth Winter. I'm the CEO and founder of Moonwalk. I believe that crowdfunding is way more about togetherness and democratization of creating the future. And I believe that crowdfunding is less about the capital. I can get money in the bank or by bigger investors, but I can never exchange the ownership and the network provided by a crowdfunded project or venture with just a single source of capital.
As you've seen, my role here is to be the evil foreigner that is giving some more intriguing comments to get people excited. So I'll say, is it really an old story going on, or is it the story of disruptive innovation? Just like mail replaced the pigeons and email replaced post, and today social media replaces emails. And maybe just like the CD replaced the record, the cassette replaced the record, and the digital streaming of music replaced the CD. Is crowdfunding replacing venture capital? Is crowdfunding replacing banks when it comes to lending? What do you think? Is it really a disruptive technology, or is it a complementary technology? Yeah, whoever wants to take.
Well, I guess from our point of view, I think it's basically both. It's disruptive because it's a different way of raising funding. But then on the other hand, it's complementary because already, as Kieran was saying, that in UK, a lot of institutions are already investing through crowdfunding platforms. So it's just a different process of handling this fundraising process. So we as a organization, we are members of the Finnish Business Angel Association, the European Business Angel Association, nowadays also UK Business Angel Association. So what I'm saying is that investors are still investors and the companies are still companies, and now you have a digital process. So it disrupts, but on the other hand, it also complements.
I disagree completely.
Maybe we can get you a mic.
That's what happened. There you have it. That's what happens when you disagree. So we still live in censorship. I agree with what you're saying, but I think it's more to that because crowdfunding actually allows me as an individual to be an investor and get experience with being an investor without being a registered investor. And as you might know, the Jobs Act signed by Obama a couple of years ago, it opened up for non-registered investors with less than $1 million in revenue or in wealth to invest in companies. So it was actually a democratization of the possibility of investing. And as we all know, Norwegians, they buy their first cottage, then their second one, and then maybe they buy even another flat to make sure that they can secure their later years. Now they can get in on investing. And sharing the risk is one of the major parts of this, of course. There's way more to being part of 135 other owners is a less risk than being part of a team of very wealthy investors that have their own agenda.
I think they're both, well, what you're saying is definitely true. The market is opening up to more and more investors. At the same time, the kind of venture capital and more traditional source of investment is combining with that kind of increased pool of investors. So definitely the number of people that are getting involved in investing and supporting early stage companies is increasing through crowdfunding. But then I think lots of venture capital firms, certainly in the UK, I can't really speak for outside of that, but I'm sure it's happening elsewhere, are combining rounds either alongside crowdfunding platforms or directly through them at the same time, alongside tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of new investors that had never had the opportunity to invest in early stage companies if you go back 10 years ago. I mean, you can invest from, I don't know, £10, £20, which you couldn't do before. At the same time, you've got the traditional investors that are able to come alongside.
Yeah, please.
Well, I'm here as a supervisor, and as a supervisor, we appreciate that financial innovation can bring many benefits, but it also bears risk, and both of them are typically unknown, both to us as supervisors and you as participants in the market. What we think, we should embrace financial innovation with what we call a watchful eye on financial stability and investor protection, which is what the supervisor is supposed to do, take care of financial stability and investor protection.
Maybe I can put some more fuel into the fire and ask, are we creating a festival for stupid money? In a way.
Yeah. Well, I would, before just sort of responding to you, that was a good way. We try to get something action, but sort of, I completely agree, because that's the you can think about it that because it happens in the internet, so it opens a new pool of investors. So that new pool is investors is the retail segment, and in Finland, for example, there has never been this requirement for accredited investors, which is in US. Many European countries there is no requirement. The UK they have the qualified investors, which is needed, but then. Well, of course, the regulator is interested about the retail segment. Do people actually understand what they are doing and where they are investing into? We ourselves, we have this MiFID license, so we have a fully licensed operator to do that. We have certain guide processes to check that and make sure that people understand what they are doing. But of course, there is still the risk. There's a freedom, but there's a risk that I can invest to anything I want, but also I may lose everything. So it's a high risk segment.
Like putting your money in the bank as well.
Yeah.
You can lose that money too.
Crowdfunding as a tool is developing as well. So what we see today might be different from what we see tomorrow. And like you said, it's opening up for everyone to become an investor. And it will also make more money available for the projects and for the startups. So it will maybe be disruptive, but at the same time do something very good.
Yeah. To what extent do you think that the process itself will educate the market about proper use of funding and how to invest? And is there a problem that people are not financially educated? Let's start with and then move to.
I think it goes a little back to what was discussed earlier today, that investments in Norway are typically been quite risk averse. For us going in like game development, it's not a very traditional bound industry in Norway, and talking to investors that don't really understand the industry, it's very hard for them to get on board. But if we can go out and talk to people who understand what we're doing and direct consumers, we can then go back and show the traditional investors that there is a market for this, there is an interest, and we can, like in our instance, we're doing it as lean as possible for the first product, and then we can see how we can scale it for the next with the help we got from the crowdfunding.
Maybe just to add the boundaries, the physical boundaries of countries, that sort of like vanishes. There aren't those anymore. And we, for example, have investors from 47 different countries. We also have people from Norway who have invested through our platform already. And a nice example is that we had this one brewery restaurant in the center of Helsinki who raised funding, and one reasonably sizable investment came from Saudi Arabia. And we thought that that's quite funny. He's probably telling his friends that, well, alcohol is forbidden in this country, but I own a brewery in Helsinki. And it's an interesting thing, because it sort of opens the boundaries, and those people who accept our money laundering and terrorist processes and are admitted as our registered users, those can invest. So anybody from around the world can come in.
Okay, let's throw a different issue here. What about collaborations with existing institutions and existing organizations, authorities, in order to make the process better, more responsible, both welcoming the innovation, but at the same time walking cautiously with it? And I think maybe you have missed it in the last session with Innovation Norway, but this was huge, huge news. That Innovation Norway is basically saying we will match successful crowdfunding campaigns. So this is a great way to collaborate. And we've also heard in the UK at least that there's great collaboration between the main banks of major banks and platforms in a way to, if I can't give you the loan in the bank, I will send you to a crowdfunding platform and will give the money through the platform. Please.
Yeah, I didn't know that this was great news because we already did this. So we actually matched NTNU Excel, which is an incubator that already December last year got funding from this program. And they matched our crowdfunding efforts with this tool. The worry on the institution side was, but what about the due diligence? How is that going to work? Who's going to do that? And so we had a lot of things to sort out, and that was a scare on the institution side that, what if I sign this document and this is different from when you have an accredited investor doing it? Luckily, we had some of the accredited investors in as well, but we did the most we could to not use that process, because then it would just be the other process, right? So we tried to test the waters of what is possible with crowdfunding. And what was very interesting is that by the end of the day, it's just like you said, what you want is proof that there is a customer, proof that there is a market, and proof that you can scale this. That's what you need. You don't need the numbers are there for support to those three issues, right? And the crowdfunding isn't a worse way of proving that there's a customer. It's not necessarily a worse way than an investor. Maybe it's a better way, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're seeing in the UK, I mean, there's lots of banks that are partnering with, well, an increasing number of banks that are working with peer-to-peer lenders. You have corporations that are looking to, for example, called Uber a corporation, but they've just started working with one of the main peer-to-peer lenders in the UK to start providing finance to the drivers to help them buy cars. For example, we've got local authorities that are providing match funds to fund kind of local community projects. There's almost something like 40 universities in the UK that have built their own platforms to engage their alumni networks, to fund students and staff and other alumni projects. So I think there's plenty of opportunity within, well, for both public sector and private sector collaborations and match funding. There's another government initiative in the UK with the Department for International Development. They've allocated an amount of money to match renewable energy projects in the developing world. So I think there's plenty of opportunity. I guess as the sector matures and kind of trust is built and kind of the industry is not going anywhere, yeah, I think there's going to be more and more of that happening in many other places.
I think this is very important. And if you say that the crowdfunding is a supplement to bank loans, for instance, crowdfunding is a proof of concept. If you have been successfully crowdfunded or equity crowdfunded, there is capital, and there's also easy to get financed through the bank. So I think this is an important part of the total financial capital available in the market, and it's a proof of concept.
Maybe one addition to the cooperation with banks. We haven't signed the contract yet, but we are discussing with one of the local banks in Finland, and the idea is that well, there is a huge amount of companies who try to get a loan, and they don't. So what we are now going to do is that they will put those companies to contact with us. We will get them equity, and after that, they are much more bankable for the bank. So because often the reason why you don't get money is that your balance sheet is not strong enough. And if you get actually own capital through crowdfunding, then actually you are going to be extremely interesting sort of customer for the bank. So these kind of things, these already work in UK, But now we are sort of in the process of creating this in Finland as well. And of course, we are looking for partners here in Norway as well.
Maybe each one of you can say what would you, from your perspective, would be an ideal development. How would you like to see crowdfunding tomorrow from your vantage point?
First of all, I think that we talked about it earlier, but I think that the risk issue in funding or spending your own capital, I think we have to address that seriously and educate the people who are educate the crowd in what risk really is. I think that's quite important in order to get the trustworthiness of crowdfunding as we want it to be. So if you really know what risk is like and you really know what you're going into when you spend your money, that's going to be a very important foundation for crowdfunding going forward.
I think also the project you mentioned, I know some do the crowdfunding through Facebook, and that's a network with people that know who you are or what you're standing for. And I think that's important. That will make people more confident on doing the investment, because the most important part of that an investor look for is that you like the startup or the funder, and that will be important also in crowdfunding, the trust, and that you know that these people will be able to move the project forward, that they will going through with the project. So I think that's even more important than the fear of losing your money, the trust you'll have to the startup and the founders.
In December, I attended the European Securities Market Authority, or ESMA as it's called, had its Financial Innovation Day in Paris. And the first issue on the agenda was how to foster growth and sustainable business model for investment-based crowdfunding. And the things that was mentioned as a challenge for crowdfunding platforms was that the business models today lack infrastructure for secondary market, and also it was highlighted by several panel members that custody was a problem because you had no way of to be able to do a transaction. You need a custody service. So this was the challenges that was highlighted at the Financial Innovation Day in Paris in this December. So I guess that's from a regulator's or a supervisor's perspective, how challenges to improve the product.
I think we've now operated about 4 years in Finland, and we come to this. After the first 2 projects, we come to the problem that yes. So what happens? How do you manage the shareholders? What is the process? And we developed our own product called Owners Portal. It's basically a web-based tool where you can transfer your shareholder list, your capital table. So you have a web-based tool where you have all your shareholders, and if there are some if there are some trades of the shares, those can be sort of updated to the tool, and then you have the history of the tools of the share ownership in the tool. So we have this kind of tool which can also be used for the companies, that you can invite the shareholders to shareholder meetings or the sort of communication to the shareholders and so on. So we came to this problem early. We solved it, and now we have it. It's been up and running for 3 years already. The second thing is the secondary market. That was the issue which came up quite early. We did a partnership with a local player in Finland called Privanet, which has been running a secondary market for about 15 years now in Finland for non-listed shares. So we partnered with them. There is this section which is called Investor List. So basically, if the company wants, they can actually list their shares to a small stock exchange. Very illiquid, but still it is there. So you can actually get rid of your shares. So I think some of the other players. I don't know exactly how in UK has that been solved many times, but I think there are these kind of initiatives in different places. We have it now up and running.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I find particularly interesting, Lasse kind of touched on it, is IPOs and kind of later stage capital raising. Because to me, I mean, one of the biggest problems that I see in the world really is that kind of businesses, their sole responsibility is to their shareholders. And at the moment, if you want to invest in a company, very kind of small amount of money, the fees that kind of brokers and stock exchanges charge mean that it's not really possible to take part for the majority of people in those markets. And if you end up with a massive kind of number of people involved in companies of all sizes, is that going to affect their behavior and how they operate? So I think that's a really interesting area. And as kind of the awareness of investing in companies increases and more people are involved, what impact is that going to have on the companies going forward?
Well, again, as mentioned before, my experience is mostly in the rewards-based against direct consumer. And what I would really like to see develop and change there is something that will hopefully come naturally, that there's a more awareness of what crowdfunding actually is. So you don't have to explain to your father and mother every time what this exactly is. But also much more visibility towards the backers of what you're actually spending the money on, that they understand what goes into a project. Like in our case, we raised about $40,000, but in actuality, our budget now is over $400,000. But our backers believe that we can build a game from scratch with $40,000. And also that there should be, while a founder should be allowed to fail, I think there should be some more clear responsibility towards spending the money right. There's been several stories lately as well with founders going out and spending their crowdfunding money and investor money on completely different things. So, yeah.
Good. Well, vision for the future. If we regard crowdfunding a way to make tenfold available investments, I'm talking about the equity space, I would like to see that shared with tenfold access to people resources, combining that with crowdsourcing. And I would like that coupled with, instead of starting with one-on-one company, starting with whole portfolios of companies. So tenfold in each of these three segments. And it's when those three things, if someone solves that, then this country will not have a crisis where people need to work and where we're going to get our tax money from and stuff like that. So that's my dream, and I hope to do my part in that. But that's where I would bet my money there, because it's about multiplying effects.
Thank you. I have one question that many in the audience have asked me and asked me to ask Finanstilsynet, more specifically, and that is, if an entrepreneur wants to run equity campaign today in Norway, is it possible? Or what do they need to do?
Well, in Norway, like in all other, I would say, civilized countries, financial services are subject to provide financial services is subject to having a license. So if a crowdfunding platform wants to offer a financial service as it's defined in the Verdipapirhandelloven, Norwegian securities market law, then it has to, if it offers a financial service, it has to have a license in advance.
So this means that if you are the company yourself, you can do it. If you offer the service from the company that you own yourself.
Yeah, but I won't
so
go
you
into
can do it.
I do not want to go into details on transaction technicalities here.
Exactly.
But as a general principle, in Norway, like in all other countries, offering financial services is subject to a license. And you have IOSCO, the International Organization of Security Commissions, published in December last year a report on regulation internationally. And out of 23 countries that was mapped, 12 countries had the same situation in Norway, that you had no specific regulation for crowdfunding, which means that crowdfunding is subject to the general legislation.
Let me use this as a call to the crowd. Whoever wants to join something that we are trying to establish, the Norwegian Crowdfunding Association. It will be a non-profit independent organization that will be in constant dialogue with authorities. Please let us know, and we'll help to involve as many of you as possible. I think it's time to get a few questions from the crowd, maybe one or two, and then we will conclude this panel. Yes, so who will go first, please?
Hi. Okay. You mentioned meeting place and network, but you didn't say anything else about that, because as an entrepreneur, the most important thing for me now is the network and a meeting place where I can meet other people with different ideas. That is much more important than capital for me.
Yeah, that's a good question. The meeting places, the loan that we will lend out, we will lend them out to the incubators and the technology transfer offices and the business angel networks. So that is the meeting places. The incubators and the TTOs will provide meeting places for the startups, and make sure also that you get the competence that you need in your situation, in your company, to move the next steps forward.
Hi. We talked about risk and trust ex ante, meaning before the fact. So is there any experience as to what happens to the crowdfunding equity investors in later, bigger rounds? I mean, do the investors get diluted, or do they get a return? Or is the jury still out on that? What happens to them?
Maybe I can answer from our investors' point of view. So far we've done 117 equity rounds. 51 has been successful out of those. Investor itself, we have done 3 crowdfunding rounds through our own platform. Last one, we raised about 1 million euros from 144 shareholders. So every time there has been a round, it's a dilution, of course. There is those who have been in there will be diluted, but every time, at least in our case, the valuation always goes up. So it's sort of like, if you came early, you sort of get more shares with same money.
I recognize that the representative of the regulator and the representative of the facilitator are sitting next to each other. So my question goes to both of you. Why is it that Innovasjon Norge doesn't use the banks as well as the other 2 or 3 networks that you mentioned, the incubators and the business angel network? Why not the banks as well, as a place for the gründer to present himself and his idea? Because the banks have a lot of experience with financing businesses. And to the regulator, my question is there anything in the pipeline that's going to come out for an hearing in relation to regulating crowdfunding sites in Norway? Is there anything that you guys talk about, or that you are discussing with the government in some way or another?
I can assure you, we do. We collaborate with the banks all over Norway. We have offices in all Norwegian counties, and we collaborate a lot. And we gather on meeting places, events, whatever. So, and we also like to invite the banks to match the finance and the funding from Innovation Norway, because we both want to go into the projects together and not standing alone as a source of finance
I'll
for
move
projects.
Over here.
Yes. Do so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes, we like to partner up. Yes.
Okay, you asked me about regulation or hearing on the regulation of crowdfunding. The way it works is that we, as a supervisor, the Norwegian Financial Supervisory Authority, does not initiate new regulation. So it's the politicians that make the legislation prepared by the department, and then when the regulation is done, we supervise it. So you really have to revert your question to the politicians.
Okay. I would like to, although we're maybe a few minutes over time, if any of you have final words or things that you want to say and haven't said so far, it's so rare to have such an excellent panel, so let's give you the opportunity. Anybody wishes to use that? Yes.
Well, I guess I like to use this opportunity. So, I see that now 4 years we've been working on this equity crowdfunding in Finland. We are now we have notified 28 European countries, EEA countries where we can operate. We are now starting to look for these cross-border opportunities in Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and UK. So, sort of Northern European perspective. We are now looking at partners, sort of target companies there. And what I see that what's going to be happening is that the borders are going to vanish. There's going to be people who are interested about something. They can participate irrespective of which country you come from. So it's sort of like the funding opportunities open much more what they have been before. So I see that this is going to be a huge change, and after 5 years, the fundraising market will look quite different.
And we need to develop the ecosystem on capital for startups in Norway. And I appreciate events like this, and I hope we can see more of it, and we will back where we can, and being a partner or being helping the way we can to make sure that the ecosystem will develop and making more money available for startups in Norway.
Fantastic, and with this good news and great attitude, I really wish to thank each and every one of you. It's been very informative and very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to land and have a coffee break, 15 minutes from now. So that means, let me look at my watch, well,